Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 10-Minute Book Talk, where three best-selling authors chat with you all things books for 10 short, sweet minutes. I'm Katherine Reay. I'm here today with my co-hosts, Rachel Linden and Marie Bostwick. And we have a really special treat for you today. Shara Moon is debuting, this is launch week, for her first historical fiction novel. She's written romance, but now she's in historical fiction with an incredibly powerful story, Let Us March On. So, Shara, welcome. We are so happy to have you here. Tell us a little bit about this novel.
Yes, so thank you guys for having me. My story is essentially about a White House maid called Lizzie McDuffie. She was a maid during the FDR era. So at that time, the world was going through transition. We were in the middle of a Great Depression, and just politically, the world was in turmoil. And she joins her husband, who was FDR's valet for a few years before he became president. She joins her husband in the White House. She works closely with Eleanor Roosevelt, with FDR, and pretty soon she becomes like a close confidant of his, and with Eleanor, a trusted employee. It goes from just White House maid to now activist, because she does feel very strongly of his policies and where he's trying to take the country, and also feel strongly that he's the right person to make a lot more changes in the African American community. And so this is where she steps in as maid turned activist, and trying to get in his ear about a lot of the issues in the African American community, and trying to push policies, or just kind of start that dialogue and bring awareness to him about those issues that were long ignored before.
Mm. Mm.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, you were writing romance, which I love, and then you switched over to historical fiction, and it's such a strong fiction start. Like, you came
Thank you.
across this really powerful, amazing story that has not been told. This is the first I've ever heard of it, and I think we were talking before, and we're all like, where was this story? How did we not hear about this? So, how did you run across it? What in the world made you go, this is the story I want to tell?
So this story actually was almost like a happy accident. I was in the process of writing my, which is now my second book that I'm writing, but I was originally writing another story completely unrelated. But in that story, I needed to find someone that had an ear into the president, like had a connection that they could leverage so that they can get in front of the president or get in front of the first lady for the issues that they were facing. And so I was talking to one of my author friends, Kaya Alderson, sorry. And she sends me this article about Elizabeth McDuffie. And she was like, oh, maybe she would be a great person to, like leverage in the story, because apparently there's this maid that's very close to the Roosevelts, and she could probably be that figure that, you need to get that, that seat at the table, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But as I was reading more on Elizabeth McDuffie, I was like, this woman she deserves her own story. She's very compelling. Like, just not only was she, this person that was in the White House, could do all the things, but she was also her own personality. She auditioned for the role of Mammy in Gone with the Wind. Like, who does that?
Love that part.
Yeah. And I was like, who is this woman? And so the more I read about her, the more I learned, the more intrigued I became. And so I pitched it to my agent, who pitched it to my editor, and they were like, you need to write this book first. And so that's what happened.
I
So
love
about
it.
that, tell us a little about your research, because as you said in your, at the beginning when you were talking about the story, there is so much globally and nationally that's going on. But you also have this really intimate portrayal of Lizzie, where you talk about her, trying out for a movie role, and you talk about the struggles with her husband, and just their very private life too. So tell us a little about your research, because I found the scope you covered remarkable.
Yes, the research was fascinating in that I was able to locate what they call her collection. So a lot of her items, her personal artifacts, her photos, her postcards, correspondence were donated to the Atlanta University Center, the Robert Woodruff Library in Atlanta. And I was able to connect with someone there who allowed me, I'm writing this story in the middle of a pandemic. And they allowed me to come to the library. And for about 5 days, I got to go in and sift through all of that information, all of those documents, and really just kind of like get a deep dive into her life and who she was and the people who loved her. She was a very fascinating woman and very much loved too.
Mm.
That would be
That comes
so
through.
fun. I mean, that's amazing to be able to have access to that, really that oh, there's a word for it. The first, you know,
primary
the original
source.
source.
Yes.
Primary
Yeah.
source.
Yes,
Yeah.
because the library has since digitized a lot of her collection, which is great. You can find a lot of what I was able to go through in person, you can find online. But I think it really was a special moment and, you know, a special time to be able to actually sit there. It's the pandemic, so we're quarantined. Like, you know, there's very limited people allowed in the library. And I just kind of really felt like I was kind of going back in time and, you know, getting to know her.
No, it's a different experience touching something she touched versus looking at an image of it. So that's very cool. I am just fascinated by this story. But, you know, I'm thinking, so Lizzie McDuffie lived, you know, 80 years ago. What is it you think that this story, like what's relevant and what's going to be impactful in the thoughts and lives of a modern reader?
I think in her story, we're talking 80 years ago where the country was in turmoil, we're in the middle of a recession. Politically, the country is divided. And it's like 80 years ago is today, you know? And I feel like what was then is what's going on now. And I think a lot of that just kind of faith in the inspiration of the fact that yes, we still have people fighting to be on the right side of history, you know. And when we continue to fight, a lot of change, good change comes from that, because FDR was a very impactful president, and with people like Lizzie McDuffie in his corner, in his ear, you know, change was able to happen. And I'm hoping that, you know, people today get inspired by her story, get inspired and encouraged in the fact that, you know, good things are to come.
Yeah.
Oh,
And an ordinary person can play a role and have an impact. I love that.
Yes.
I love that.
Too.
Great
Love
story.
So we have a minute for our last question, which we ask every author. Shara Moon, what is bringing you joy today?
What brings me joy today, that brings me joy every day, is my kiddos. They really do. I mean, I have a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and an 8-month-old, and it's a lot. I mean, there's days and nights
And she still writes books.
And she writes books.
I know,
Yeah.
right? And I'm like, I don't know about this motherhood thing, but then every morning I see them, I hear them laugh, I see their smiles, and that brings me joy and it makes it worth it.
That is fantastic.
That.
Well, thank you for taking a moment out of this incredible week. Everybody, let us march on. Hit the Market published yesterday. So go out and grab it. It's available now. It is a huge week for Shara, and we thank you so much for spending a moment of it with us. So everybody, thanks for being at the 10-Minute Book Talk. We'll see you next week, and be well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shara.